not working. I think it is. I can hear it all right. Abe says he can hear it, so that's working there. It's falling over me now. Well, we make a bit of a start, folks, at the 1:15. And I want to welcome you all here. This, as you know, is our fourth public meeting of the Quinn Support Group. First meeting we had in Cullyhanna, then Crossbyglen, then Castleblaney, and now here in Newry. A little bit further away from home, but nevertheless it's good to see a decent turnout. I think it's important to point out before we go any further that the Quinn Support Group was formed not simply because Paul Quinn was brutally murdered, because we weren't formed for about 3 weeks after that. We were formed on the 12th of November in response to the scurrilous claims that were laid against Paul by our own MP, alleging serious criminality, as if somehow that vindicated the slaughter of a young man, not just the murder, but the beating of him from his toes, systematically with iron bars, right up his legs to his trunk, and then changing tools to cudgels with nails in them to puncture his trunk section, and then back to the iron bars to batter that young man's head. And even talking about it is hard, and it's hurtful, I know, in the family. Unfortunately, I must point out that Paul's mother, Breach, is not able to be here tonight. Not only was her son, and Stephen's son, and Kathy's brother, and James' brother brutally murdered, but they've had to listen to the scurrilous lies from our MP. And then yesterday, she was down in Stormont, and she saw him again with his weasel words. And then he got up and walked out. He didn't even excuse himself. He didn't say, I've got to go here or go there. He turned, went to the back of the room, and sniggered and laughed with Francie Malloy, who we've heard some strange things about in recent weeks. And then he departed. So is it any wonder that poor Breach is not fit to be here tonight? Her heart broke at the brutal murder of her son, and injury heaped upon injury, week upon week. Even Cuivan O'Quillan, speaking in Leinster House, said that anything Paul was involved in had no bearing on his murder. But our MP, who's supposed to represent old people in Newry and Armagh, can't find it in his heart to say that. He still brings out the dirt. He still tries to bring out the dirt. And I want to put it to you all here tonight, that if anybody in this room thinks that Paul Quinn, for any reason, deserved to be slaughtered, then I think you should just get up and leave the room now. Although I don't believe anybody in here does believe that. I certainly hope not. But we have, as I said, this is our fourth meeting, and we have developed a kind of a system. And again, no matter what you're told, we're not a political party or a political group. We're after justice for Paul Quinn and for his family, and for the other young people of South Armagh, that they can go about their business. But the first item of business after just the opening remarks has been to now, and we carry on tonight, I'll ask you to stand for a minute's silence in memory of Paul Quinn. Thank you very much. Now to call on Paul's father, Stephen, to say a few words.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Bridge and myself and James and Kathy, I want to thank you all for coming here tonight. It's hard to explain just how much we get from seeing supporters of our cows coming out first in Cullyhanna, then Crossmaglen, Castlevany and now Newry. We have got great support from politicians north and south of the Bow, from all parties except one. And that support is very important to us, but somehow your support, the support of the ordinary people, is even more important to us. Paul was just another 21-year-old lad. He could be a bit daft at times, and as so can hundreds of other young men at that age. He did not deserve to be murdered in any way. No one has the right to do that. If they have the right to do that, your son might be next. We believe that he was murdered by members of the Provisional IRA, over personal grievances. Nothing to do with politics, just a couple of rhymes. We will never know what Paul could have been in the long term, what he might have achieved because his life was cut so short by murderers. Thank you again for your support. We will be keeping our campaign going until we get justice for Paul, and hope you will continue to stand with us. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Stephen. And what Stephen said there, that the family have met politicians north and south, and that's correct, even met politicians from England and different places. What he said is the support of the ordinary people is actually, does their hearts even more good than meeting the great and the good. Meeting the politicians is very, very important. That's where the power lies, and they can drive various agendas. But the night of the first meeting in Cullyhanna, we were standing outside after the meeting, and I said to Bridge, that was very hard on you in there. She said, no, James, that's the first bit of relief I've got since the murder. Seeing those people there, she says, looking up at me and backing us, she said, is doing me good. And so your turning out is very important. And I'll add my thanks to Stephen for you coming out. And it's important to reiterate that piece again about irrelevant what Paul may or may not have been involved in. There's no bearing on the matter. Down in County Tyrone at the moment, there's a serious sex offender living in a certain area. And the people down there are upset about that. So they're complaining. I think they're talking about petitions, various things, that this person removed from the area. Nobody is saying, let's bring him to a shed and batter him to death. Correctly, they're not saying that. Because no matter what anybody done, and I don't believe Paul Quinn done a quarter or a tenth or a 20th of what certain people are whispering around the country that he done, I don't believe it. But even if he did, even if he was the biggest blackguard in the country, which again I say he wasn't, nobody had the right, number one, to kidnap him, number two, to beat him, number three, to murder him, and number four, to murder him in such a brutal, sadistic fashion. And it was sadistic, believe me. And let's not forget, folks, that there were 3 other young men in that shed that early evening. Kidnapped also. Kidnapped and beaten. One of them had bones broke. Let's not forget them. They had their own trauma, the trauma of their own beating, which they probably find minor compared to the trauma of what they heard in that shed. When they heard Paul's screams and shouts for mercy, and heard him crying for his mother, and heard his voice getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and could hear the thuds of the beating continuing. It's not nice, I know, but I think it's important to see it, because that's what happened. And those 3 young survivors, I hope they don't hear it all their life, but I know they'll hear it for a long time. They know, when they go to bed at night, in the quiet moments, they're back in that shed. They're also victims, and in some ways forgotten about. No politicians calling to them to see how they're doing or asking what happened to them. No. They're left to suffer too. We shouldn't forget them. But I now want to call upon Paul's brother James to say a few words.
Our Paul was just Paul. Those who knew him well know what I mean by that. He would do anything for those he had time for. He didn't give a damn for those he had no time for. He was not a big man in size. He had a big heart and was no coward. That's why he was more. He wouldn't bow down to those who think they have some right to rule our country and lay down the law. And I am not talking about the police. There are people out our way, and probably here too, who think they have some right to respect from everyone here. Never mind the fact that many of them are very dodgy people themselves. Criminals who know that call Paul a criminal. They could teach us all about being a criminal. No one is calling Paul a criminal anymore except their MP. He is some kind of an MP, blackening a dead man's name. There are people being beaten up across Glen. There are attacks on cars, crashes happening in the square, with drunken drivers that are being ignored by those who usually shout loudest, like the safety groups. Why are they selected? Some incidents are highlighted, others are kept quiet. You don't need me to tell you why some are kept quiet, fear of who they will lead to. It's the same with Paul. They talk about going to the police, while at the same time ruling out the people we know who killed Paul, the provost. We didn't keep quiet about the mother of Paul. We won't keep quiet, and we'll soldier on until we see the mothers behind bars where they belong, no matter where they are or where they're from. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James. I meant to tell you at the start, but the way we've gone at the previous meetings, we do the same here again tonight. The members of the top table, some of them to say a few words, and then we'll call upon any councillors, MLAs, people like that who are here to have the right to say a few words. And then we throw the meeting open to the floor to either make points, to ask questions or whatever else, and that's the way we'll work again tonight. I should have also pointed out at the start that a couple of our members are not here also tonight. Jerry McMahon cannot be here because his sister-in-law died in the early hours of yesterday morning, so Jerry naturally can't be here. Seamus Bellew, a farmer, is away in Scotland selling pedigree animals, so again that's the way it goes. And Councillor Geraldine Donnelly, who's been in all our meetings and has been very helpful to the family and to the group, is in bed with the flu, unfortunately. So again, that can't be helped. So where am I? Again, you can see. Sorry? I don't see Mickey. Is Mickey Brady here, is he? He was in Stormont yesterday. I don't see him here today. We didn't speak yesterday, but whoever.
Is the local MP here?
I don't believe he is, somehow. Somehow I don't believe he is. He doesn't seem to think it worth his while to come to any of these meetings in his own constituency to speak about a matter as important as murder. I mean, what matter could be more important than the murder of one of his own constituents? And to my knowledge, the only responses he has made so far have always been in the back of something the family or the group has said. Then he responds by saying A, B, C, D, such as go to the police, etc. But he never comes out on his own back and makes a statement about this murder without having to be prompted by the committee or the family or something some other politician says. Then he will respond when they say something. And I think myself that is actually shameful. But his behaviour yesterday was definitely shameful. As Stephen here said, it was disgraceful to get up and walk out of a meeting that wasn't even halfway over without even making an excuse as to why he was doing so. But I'm now going to call upon Paul McCooey to say a few words.
Other victims. There are many opinions on whether this gang meant to kill Paul or just give him a brutal beating. Many believe that they meant to beat him so badly as to leave him in a wheelchair for life. This was to be a warning to other young men not to defy the men who have their own personal interests in controlling the area, financial interests mainly. One of the murderers said to one of the 3 young men who were beaten, Now you know who the bosses are around here. That was a message for all of us. Toe the line or else. Other people believe that the beating was so systematic, from Paul's toes to his head, every inch beaten, that they must have known they were killing him. These gangs have beaten many people down through the years and are still at it. Some of the murderers were probably involved in previous beatings, and their bosses definitely were. Dozens of people have been beaten, some very badly down throughout the years. Families were left not knowing where to turn. The biggest problem was that we, the public, kept our heads down and said things like, "Sure, he must have done something wrong. I hear he wasn't a great boy," or something like that. That was nonsense then, and this is nonsense now. It was a handy way of not getting involved. It was understandable, but it was wrong. We can do nothing about past beatings, but we can tell these thugs that their day is over. We want them off our backs. No one has the right to abduct and beat people. Other people have been bullied and intimidated for all kinds of reasons. This is part of the same culture of control. When did our neighbours turn into a new kind of shankle butcher? What sort of monster have we created in our community when our MP stands up for those who most believe murdered Paul? The murderers thought our campaign would not get off the ground, and we would quickly fold. They were wrong. We are not going away. We are out for justice. We will accept nothing less than justice. No more murders, no more beatings, no intimidation, no cover-ups, and no excuses. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. You know, when those people whisper to one of their other victims, "Now you know who the bosses are around here," that was a message for us all. It wasn't just a message for the young men in the shed, and they obviously were learning the lesson there. The message was to go further afield, that we have to be careful what we do, who we speak to, where we go, because if we don't, we or our children could be in a shed somewhere too. But one of the things this group wants to do is ensure that never happens again. And Breach Quinn, in the midst of her grief, in the early days after the murder, said on, I think it was UTV, which was asked what she want in relation to the murder. And she actually put other people first. She said, "I want the young people of South Armagh, and the place in Newry equally, to be able to go about their business without having to look around and see who's there. Without having to look into a pub or a club to see who's in it before they go in themselves. Not to have to worry who they happen to look at as they walk past or who they brush against. Apart from the normal way those things happen in pubs and clubs anyway. Not because somebody is seen as, in their own eyes, somebody deserving respect. Somebody of importance. Each individual deserves respect on their own merits. Not because they're connected to some particular man or woman or group or clique or whatever. And a small point that I've made at every meeting so far, I'm going to make it again tonight. I can't help it because this MP of ours annoys me severely, and he's annoyed the Quinn family and other people. Talks a lot about criminals. Talks in particular about smugglers. And the reality is smuggling around maybe a quarter of the people of South Armagh. That's a fact, whether we like it or not. That's a fact. But I've never known smugglers to go to war with each other. I've never known diesel men to kill each other. I don't know why they would. And if they did, I don't believe they'd be as good at it as they are here. But the real point I want to make is that when our MP is so busy castigating, he actually talked about that area out there. He said, there's a lot, he said this I think at the spotlight of prime time. I've got it on the record at home anyway on the video. He said a lot of smuggling and criminal gangs out there. Now the Brits called us bandit country, and according to our MP, it's still bandit country. And he's the man who says he's standing up for us. But the point about the criminals is, some weeks ago, Arthur Morgan, the TD, was also on prime time, saying that smuggling defrauded the taxpayer and therefore it hurt health service and everything else. Well, that's quite true. It does. That was on a Tuesday night. But on the Friday of the same week, it came out in the paper that our MP had given a reference to two multi-millionaire brothers who had defrauded the government of £4.5 million of tax. And you see, the young fellow coming down the road with a box of cigarettes or a couple of 100 litres of diesel, he's hurting the health service, the education and everything else. But the multi-millionaire pocketing millions is a gentleman, and he deserves a reference. Sheer rank hypocrisy, and that's what's reigning in this case from our MP, is hypocrisy from day one to now. Of course, he's become a lot more friendly with millionaires in recent years. Some of them wouldn't have let him in his door when he was a Republican, but times have changed on that matter. I want to also read a small piece here that was said yesterday in Stormont, and I'll let you guess which party it came from. This is only part of what one particular man said. He said the Quinn murder has produced a set of circumstances that are not unique, but that require a response because of their political implications. Now there's a man worried that a murder might affect the political situation. Not so much worried about the murder, but the effect it might have on politics. You can also say, well, this tells you who it was anyway, that is why Sinn Féin proposes an alternative view. They propose an alternative view in case the murder might have an effect on politics. Now, there's a fire from the horse's mouth. An MLA, I think he's the leader down there in Strobel or something like that.
Resign.
Here. In other circumstances, you can also say, in other circumstances, my party would not have made any comment. Now, there you have it. There's a man murdered, and this party's worried it might have an effect on the political situation, so they said, Jesus, we better make a comment. So they made a comment. However, he goes on to say, the situation is being used by those who wish to bring down the political institutions. Later on, he actually says that would be a bigger crime than the murder. Therefore, Sinn Féin has submitted a scenario, or an option, that the killing might be related to something else. Now, that's what their leader in Stormont said. That's a long way from what Conor Murphy says. Conor says he knows you are a smuggling, criminal, shooting gang. This guy's saying, wait a minute now here, if this murder is proved to be the way some people say it is, it has political implications, and therefore we better propose another scenario. They have proposed a scenario, a fairy tale, ludicrous and as stupid as that statement. Actually, I think that he made an honest statement without realising it. He pointed out why Sinn Féin are taking the line that they are taking. I want to call on Gabe Quinn now to say a few words.
Can we get justice for Paul? I believe we can, but we all know that it's not going to be easy. If Paul has been murdered, as Conor Murphy said, by a fuel smuggling gang, then beyond any doubt they would all be locked up long before now. Funny how the MP seems to know exactly who killed Paul Quinn, but never says it outright, and doesn't seem to have told the Gardaí who these killers are. The problem is that Paul wasn't slaughtered by a fuel smuggling gang, although some of the murderers are probably smugglers of fuel, diesel, launderers, cigarette smugglers and bad alcohol, as well as being members of the Provos. Being an IRA member doesn't stop someone being a smuggler or anything else. Even doesn't stop them being MI5 agents. These murders are actually describing whatever legacy the IRA wanted to leave this murder and a lot of other behaviour is bringing it down to the gutter. Bobby Sands or Raymond McCreesh didn't die for gangsterism or killing children. Gardaí would rip up a murder committed by smugglers in no time at all. This murder is different because these killers operate as part of a long-established chain of command, with access to help in any different ways. When the local MP calls on people to go to the Gardaí with information, and at the same time states categorically that Paul wasn't killed by the Provost, then someone knows that they are not supposed to tell the Gardaí about IRA members. That leaves the old fear of the informer and what happens to informers still standing. That leaves it that bit harder for people to go to the Gardaí. That shows down the investigation, and all parties are now supporting policing. How can anyone be an informer? The investigation does appear slow, but I have little doubt that it is going ahead and that it will succeed, and that other people are going to the Gardaí to tell what they know. If it appears slow, it is because it is thorough, and because the Gardaí won't move until they have a full case built. Almost a month ago, the Gardaí said they had over 100 pieces of information and statements from over 400 people. How accurate all the information is, or how well it can stand up, we do not know, but we do know that everything helps the investigation, even if it is just to rule out some line of inquiry. We have had 30 years of not cooperating with policing, so what is happening is a culture change. You must have, of us, certainly for those of us who lived through all or some of the 30 years of the Troubles. The mothers of Paul hope that as time passes everything will go quiet and Paul will be forgotten about. This won't happen. We won't let it happen, and the Gardaí assure us that they will not let it happen. Taking Paul across the border was a bad mistake. Maybe they didn't want to upset their new friends in the DUP by carrying out an operation in the 6 counties. But they upset the Gardaí and the people of Monaghan, as well as people around the whole Collyhanna district. Maybe they thought that the claim of no Army Council sanction would make everything okay. It didn't. We never believed it was sanctioned at that level, but it was sanctioned at South Armagh level. It is strange that P. O'Neill has not spoken out yet. The IRA has not denied the murder that left that to around he to do, but he is not a spokesman for the IRA. We are not anti-IRA or anti-Sinn Féin. Indeed, many of our members were Sinn Féin voters and supporters. We are anti-murder and anti-cover-up. We are opposed to the existence of an organisation which kills our children. We are opposed to the lie that the victim almost deserves what he got. We are supposed to tell that those like us who stand up for justice have political agendas. We are supposed to smear tactics and the creation of new victims, as we'll have read and looked in papers, in an attempt to take the spotlight from murder. Conor Murphy is the last man standing on the line of feuding smugglers, killing each other. It would be funny if it wasn't so critical, so serious, if it wasn't about murder. Standing up for justice for Paul is standing up for yourselves and your families. Seeking justice for Paul is seeking justice in and for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe. Some very important points there, including the investigation. Over 4 months now since Paul was murdered, and people are saying, you know, there's nothing happening, these boys will never be caught, etc., etc., etc. But personally, I believe they will, and Stephen believes they will. Both of us will be talking to a number of Gardaí officers on many occasions, and we're convinced that they are genuinely 100% serious about this investigation. And they have told us personally that they are gathering information, piecing it together, and they've got to, it's okay having the pieces, but they've got to put them together. They've got to assemble them, and they've got to build a watertight case. No point coming out on Tuesday morning and arresting 10 or 12 people and then getting out on Thursday morning. When they're lifted, I want to see them staying in. I want to see the right people be lifted and kept in, and that's what Stephen wants, and Bridge, and James, and Cathy, and the vast majority of the community of South Armagh, and that's very, very important. And it's still important, if you think you might know some little thing, you might think it's not important, but tell them anyway. Let them decide if it's important or not. As Gabe said, I'm sure there are people going with the best of intentions to the guards, and the guards will listen to everything they say and take it down in detail and thank them very much. Then when they look at it, they may say it has no bearing, but then they can say, okay, let's forget about that particular, we say vehicle, or man, or road, or shed, or whatever. They can rule that out. They can focus in more depth on something else. So everything is important. Everything is important. So if you think you saw or heard any weeding at all, let them know and let them decide where it leads. Again, being, as I say, an amateur committee, I forgot a thing we normally do, which is introduce the members of the top table here. On the far right here, my right is Paul McCooey. Sean Quinn, different family, the other Quinn is out of our country, Paul's sister Cathy, Gabe Quinn, another Quinn, Stephen, of course, Paul's father, Barbara Rooney. Barbara, by the way, has 2 jobs. She's our treasurer and our secretary, because when we started first, we didn't know what we were going to do, beyond having a chat and a talk. We didn't even know the work that was ahead of us. We actually sat in Stephen's house the first night, but 50 people came at very short notice, and we decided to form a committee, see what we could do. Somebody said we need a secretary. Somebody said, nah, what do we want a secretary for? No, we didn't. Somebody came up and threw £20 at him and said, well, they're going to need a treasurer because there's the money to start, yeah. And then a few more through, and a few pounds for Barbara for the treasurer's job. Within a week we knew we needed a secretary as well. And none of us had the skills, the computer skills, plus the word processing skills to act as secretary. So Barbara again took on that job, so fair play to her. She's done a very good job for us in the 2 jobs. And then we have James, Paul's brother, and another Quinn, a different Quinn again, Peter Quinn. Cullyhan in that area has a lot of Quinns, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, we're coming now to the stage where any public reps from anywhere in the country can come up and have a few minutes to make whatever point they want to make. And after that, then we will throw it open to the public. But before we do that, again, I'm forgetting, we said Barbara wants to make a short, basic report on finance.
Website up and running, www.quinsupport.com, which shows all media coverage and has all information about the group. Unfortunately, meetings and advertising are expensive, and we're always relying on donations from you, the public, and we have done since the Quinn Support Group has started out. We have already received a number of generous donations, and we are most grateful for them. So I'm asking you, please, to make a small contribute at the door at the end of the meeting before you leave. We need to administer the funds properly, so we've set up a bank account at the Bank of Ireland, Crossmaglen. So I also want to appeal to anyone with skills or experience in raising money to come to our aid by getting in touch with us. Thank you.
Just what Barbara mentioned criminality there, I think Dominic Bradley put it best yesterday in Strowman, I forget his exact words, but he pointed out that there's nobody left in Ireland saying Paul was some kind of a major league criminal, except one, not one party, one particular individual is still petting that line in public, and it's a shame. We'll not deal with it any further. But where are the roving mics? Might be the simplest for people coming up to speak. So.
Mr. Chairman, please make a statement there that only one person said that Paul was a criminal. How come Vicky Berry sat with a just that question yesterday that Storman said nothing?
Now Mickey didn't speak. Mitchell McLaughlin spoke.
Mr. Chairman, it's just a question. Was Paul a criminal? He didn't look at me.
No, but unfortunately he's not here. I take your point very, very sincerely and strongly, and I agree with you. But he's not here for some reason. He didn't feel it necessary to come to an important meeting in his own town which I'm sure he's proud to represent. Maybe has he come in lately, no? No, Mickey's not here, so I mean, we can't speak for Mickey. I'm sure whenever you meet him, you can ask him that one. Whenever I meet him, I'll ask him that one myself. Yeah. That's right, the empty seats are very, very important. So if public reps want to come up, make their way up towards the front here, we'll hear from you now, before we throw open to the floor. And if you would just state your name and your party.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Dominic Bradley, SDLP MLA. And I just want to congratulate the Quinn Support Group on the distance that they have come to date. I think they have conducted a very effective campaign, and I think we had one of the important points in that yesterday. The Assembly debate which we had in Stormont, I think it represents an important turning point in your campaign for truth and justice. So often in the past, over the decades of violence, people who suffered grievous loss literally had nowhere to turn. They had no place to make their voice heard. And those who inflicted injury and death, whether it was the Provos, the Loyalists, the police or the British Army, could simply turn their backs and ignore the victims. Or they could lie and blame the victims, as they so often did. And apart from a few lone voices, there was no hearing in London. They might get heard in Dublin, but Dublin could do nothing, and the wider world knew very little about it. I'm pleased that now at last we have our own assembly, we have a place that has to listen. And I think the Quinn Support Group made them listen yesterday. And I'm in no doubt at the presence of the Quinn family, Breach, Stephen, Cathy and James in the public gallery at Stormont, and the strong and visible presence of the Quinn Support Group in the corridors of power, I think that made a significant impact on the debate. You made them listen yesterday, and your campaign has done much more than that. You have made the Irish government listen and change its tune. You have made the British establishment in the north listen and change its tune. And you have the solid backing of Dáil Éireann, and you now have the solid backing of the Northern Ireland Assembly. Just look carefully for a minute at what happened yesterday. We put down a motion which condemned Paul's murder and made it very clear to all who was involved in that murder. And the Assembly agreed unanimously with the motion, with one voice. There was no vote held. There was no vote called for. Those who spoke against the motion, and indeed attacked your campaign as they had done before, did not vote against the motion. I regret that there was one Assembly member who confirmed his earlier allegations of criminality against Paul, although I personally asked him to lift them yesterday. He then left the chamber. His departure so early in this important debate was commented upon by a number of speakers and by the media. But even those who attacked the Quinn campaign and attacked the motion, as I said, they didn't vote against it. They abstained. The Assembly has now spoken with one voice. It has condemned the murder and made clear its view of who was responsible. There is no longer any significant body of opinion on this island or beyond which disputes that view. Quite simply, you have won the argument, and you have won it by force of the truth. But it was not all truth yesterday. The campaign was misrepresented. Just for the record, in statements that I personally released after the murder, I didn't accuse the IRA of murdering Paul Quinn. What I said at the time was that the apparatus of paramilitarism had been used in the murder. Gradually, though, it became clear from An Garda Síochána, from the PSNI, and from the International Monitoring Commission sources, it became clear that what the family had told me, I didn't doubt it at the time, it became clear that that was the truth, that the IRA was involved in the murder. But that truth was disputed. It was said that the AMC statement of the 13th of November, in which John Grieve said current and or former members of the provisional IRA were involved in the murder, was just his personal opinion and not based on any real evidence. On another occasion, it was dismissed as the personal opinion of an English branchman. Well, I have talked to the AMC. Breach, Stephen, Jim McAllister and myself, we met the whole commission not so long back, and we asked them about that. And we got assurances, and I can say very solid assurances from the AMC that John Grieve was speaking not in any personal capacity, but for all the members of the Commission. And I trust the AMC. They are not people who are easily hoodwinked. They sift through the evidence they get very carefully, no matter what the source is. In fact, Gerry Adams trusts the AMC. Whenever it suits them, he can quote them to reassure people that the IRA is remaining inactive. You can't, on the one hand, agree with an organisation one day, and on the other hand, dismiss it another day. It was also said that the guards were working on the were not working on the theory that the provosts were involved, and in fact regarded the emphasis on the provost as a serious distraction. I will leave it to the many people here who have been working closely with the guards, who have been in touch with the Garda liaison team to work out for themselves why anyone would make such a ridiculous statement. There was a lot of talk about the politicisation of the murder inquiry. During the debate yesterday, I made the obvious point that the involvement of members of the IRA in his murder politicised it from the very moment of Paul's death. I also said it is naive to expect people to believe that the murder was a result of a dispute between two criminal gangs, considering the fact that Conor Murphy paraded Seamus Mallon some years ago for suggesting that there were any criminals in South Armagh, and he accused him of supporting Merlin Reese's castigation of South Armagh as bandit country. He should tell us now where all these criminals have suddenly come from, and how they have so conveniently, not only one gang of them, but two, appeared to bolster up his arguments. Great play is made of the fact that the Irish government are saying that the IRA was not involved in the murder of Paul Quinn as a corporate entity. And indeed, no one has argued that they were. Neither do I believe that the chief executive of the IRA, who may very well sit in the Assembly, made a corporate decision to have Paul Quinn murdered. I do not even believe that the middle management team of the IRA, the so-called Army Council, made that decision. But what I do believe is this, as was stated in the motion in the Assembly yesterday, that present members of the IRA were involved in this murder. Ladies and gentlemen, the reality is that we have a functioning murder machine in South Armagh. It is fairly clear by now that the Army Council has prohibited actions such as organised beatings, and it is equally clear that the South Armagh provosts do not give a damn about this prohibition. They don't take their orders from Dublin, neither do they take them from Gerry Adams in Belfast. If this is the case, if this case shows anything, it is that the orders are probably flowing the other way. Even if the provisional IRA has theoretically been stood down, individual members still have access to its structures, to its skills and experience. And the group as a whole is still trying to exercise community control. And worst of all, it can still draw on political support from Sinn Féin in exercising that control. Even if we do get the murderers of Paul Quinn locked up for a long time, we still have to face that problem. That is a challenge for the local community, and indeed for the whole community, and for all of us, and for our whole democratic system. That is why the Assembly had to speak out. That is why Dal Éireann had to make its voice heard. We have got to dismantle the murder machine. We want the people who killed Paul Quinn to be locked up for a long time. But we, Democratic Ireland, we want more. We want to be sure that it can never happen again. It is not good enough to be told that the murder machine is just ticking over, or even that it has been switched off. It must be dismantled, and this campaign must keep going until that is done. We cannot have all parties in Northern Ireland, in the island as a whole, supporting the policing structures, and at the same time a group of people who think that they can act as judge, jury and executioner whenever they feel it necessary. We must ensure in the future that anything like the murder of Paul Quinn or any type of beating never happens in our community again. And I commend the Paul Quinn support group for the wonderful work that they have done in this campaign to date. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dominic. Well said. A couple of comments just on that. One about IRA of South Armagh and their leadership. Actually, not IRA, but IRA haven't spoken on this matter. Conor Murphy speaks on it, and Jerry Adams done it in the waffle to the beginners and Maskey. But it's a known fact, especially by there are people here in this room tonight who could spell it out. You don't imagine they would want to. The IRA was probably the most effective. The South Armagh IRA was the most effective IRA anywhere in Ireland. There's no question about that. And one of the reasons they were so effective was they never told the leadership what they were doing. And that's the fact. They were close-mouthed. When leadership figures come down to see them in South Armagh, they met men with balaclavas on them, unless maybe a man that already was known to them. They kept their own counsel. They done their business, and they done it from their perspective exceedingly well. So the idea that somehow somebody can go to 2 or 3 people in South Armagh and say there's more than that, and they would say yes. Or if they say no, it's the truth, it's ludicrous. Other very important point is that intimidation and bullying is still going on throughout South Armagh. And it takes many forms. And one form it takes, a very disgusting form, is that if something happens to a certain person or their property, it's all over the media. There are safety groups and all kinds of people up to talk about it and make kind of big statements about it, talk about the gangster culture and all these things. But when things happen to other people, when cars are smashed up across Glen, or young men beaten in pubs, for some strange reason it doesn't go in the paper at all. There are no statements, nobody's concerned. The only reason is, of course, because of where that can lead. This was James touched upon this. This is actually very, very important. There are people putting themselves forward as paragons of virtue, and they're totally and utterly and completely selective in what they're interested in. Now, they accuse our group of being selective, but of course we are selective. We were formed because of the murder of Paul Quinn and to deal with issues around that. That's what we are for. We're not a party. We're not a safety group. We're not getting paid as members of a PPP or a DPP or whatever else it is. There was an article in one of the papers, it was in the Democrat or the Government Examiner this week. I think there were 7 paragraphs, and each paragraph mentioned funding and the need for more funding. That was, I think they were to call themselves something of a confederation of safety groups or something like that, or something like that. But funding seemed to be the main issue in their statements. Funding, funding, funding. Not crime, not criminals, not beating up men in pubs or smashing windows in cars. Funding. That tells its own story. Next speaker, please.
Stephen, my name is Brendan Curran. I'm a current chair of the local DPP. I'm a Sinn Féin councillor, which I make absolutely no apology for. I was invited by your family through an SDLP councillor to attend another public meeting, which I was unable to do, and I've done that tonight. At the time, I issued a press statement and I said at the council that I absolutely supported your family's campaign, and I still do that. I call on anyone who has information, however small, to hand it over to both the Guards and the PSNI. And I take that a step further. Give it to me, and I will give it to them. So, I would like to pledge my support and sympathy to you and your family. But I would also like to complain about the behaviour of Mr McAllister when I walked through the doors tonight. he laughed at me, he jeered at me, and he verbally attacked me. Now if that's what your campaign is about, I can't see too many other people wanting to come freely through the door. And maybe you find it yourself funny. But I've come here...
Mr. Cohen, when did they laugh at you, when did they jeer at you, when did they verbally attack you?
When I come through the door, Jim.
I spoke to you, said good evening, Brandon. You ignored me and walked on. So I did laugh at you then. I laughed at your childishness and refused to speak to me.
I can speak to who. I can speak to who.
Even Mickey Grady had the guts to talk to me left and strong and so on Catherine or Ruan, but you had, you walked past like a wee boy. And then I laughed at you.
That's right. I can speak to
I laughed at you for walking past like a child, like a whipped corn.
I can speak to who I like to or who I don't.
Of course you can.
If that gives
but
you
don't
the right,
blame me for speaking to you.
if that gives you the right, as the chairman of this group, to laugh and to jeer and to sneer, I don't care if many people from the gallery clap. I think it does Paul a disservice and the support group a disservice. Thanks very much.
Hold on a wee minute. Brendan. Do you think our Paul was a criminal? Do you believe our Paul was a criminal?
I don't know your Paul. It doesn't really matter what I think of your Paul. Your Paul did not deserve to die in such a brutal way. And I mean that with all my heart. And I really don't care. I don't care. If anyone wants to speak after me, I give them the microphone. I do not care who it was, as individuals or a gang. I would like to see them brought before the courts, and I'd like to see them go to prison. Thank you.
Do you think yet that Murphy was right to call Paul a criminal?
Resignation from Murphy.
Our MP said what he said. I'm sure he based it on information. How can I say, as I said to you at the start, I don't know whether Paul was or wasn't, and it's of little interest to me whether he was or wasn't. He did not deserve to be killed in such a brutal way.
Hold on. I'll ask you a question. Do you agree with the government, what they say, that he was not a criminal? Do you agree with them or do you disagree with them?
I don't have any information.
This man, so you know nothing about it, Brandon. Thank you very much.
I know nothing is right.
Brandon has no information about anything. Thank you very much, Brandon.
Brandon, just what we said.
No, we'll take it as we're going, but we're getting a bit out of order.
Brandon, just one second. Can you tell me how Conor Murphy can say that everybody else in South Armagh is an innocent victim except for Paul Quinn? Yesterday in Stormont, he got up and he said an innocent victim got his windows broke, got his lorry burnt, right? But he can't say Paul Quinn was an innocent victim, which he was.
I am here to answer for me and myself. Now, I'm sure you can meet Conor Murphy, you can invite him, or you can even write to him.
He was invited.
If you want to. Well, I'm here to answer for myself as a local councillor and as a local chair of the DPP. Thank you.
Okay, all right, folks. No, everybody get their turn. Everybody get their turn. Who's next, please? Jerry, please, friends, folks, give this gentleman here, Jerry Lynch, of the Lions Party, a warm welcome. He's travelled with Johnny to be here. He also travelled all the way across the thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jim. And as I said the last time I was at one of these meetings in Cross, and in December, thank you, particularly you up there, but also all of you who came here tonight to show your support for Paul, and thank you particularly also to all of you who were at Stormont yesterday, and I see quite a few familiar faces about the audience from that. And coming to Stormont yesterday, speaking directly face to face with people really did make a difference. It's one thing to read something in the paper or see a clip about it on TV, but it's quite another thing to meet people face to face, meet people who are directly affected. And the fact that you came there, and you came there in such strong numbers, and made your case so clearly and passionately, I think made a big difference. So thank you for that. The other thing I want to say about yesterday, and I've always wanted to avoid any sort of party politicking, but I was genuinely shocked by the behaviour of Conor Murphy yesterday in the chamber. I think to walk out in a debate about the murder of one of your own constituents, which is about the most serious issue that can ever affect a politician, was absolutely disgraceful and shameful. For all Connor's eloquent words, and he has many eloquent words and he's a very intelligent man, that walkout was more eloquent, and it was eloquent for all the wrong reasons. And I'd say this particularly to Brendan Curran, if he's still about and hasn't walked out, because I know plenty of people in Sinn Féin, and I know plenty of people who are good people who, whatever is said by the party publicly, privately, are shocked by this sort of thing. But I was also very disappointed by this snickering and skiting particularly at Paul, that came from other Sinn Féin MLAs. It wasn't just Conor Murphy. And people like John O'Dowd jumping in at the end of the debate to have a wee skitter. I just thought it was disgraceful. And as I say, if Brendan's still listening, as a party, you actually need to take a long cold look at yourselves, because this isn't about, that wasn't politics as I understand it, and it was nothing to do with justice or democracy or fairness. We're supposed to be entering a new era, and in a lot of ways we are. I had a friend from England over at the weekend. It's only the second time he's been here, and we sort of went for a drive about the countryside. You sort of thought, actually, this place has changed a lot. And then I thought about Paul afterwards. I was just talking about it with his friend, and no matter how much they've changed, they still haven't changed enough when a situation like this can happen. And I was sort of thinking a wee bit, a couple of friends of mine went on holiday to Sicily last year, and it's a bit like you can go on holiday over there and you can look at all this lovely countryside and all these lovely wee churches and have your dinner at these lovely restaurants, and you don't need to know as a visitor that if you're a young lad there and you cross the wrong fella, you can end up beaten to death. It happens over there. Happened to two fellas about a month ago, was a big thing in the papers. And if you cross the wrong fella, you can end up dead. And powerful politicians will protect the murderers because it suits them. And we are in serious danger of building that sort of society for ourselves here. And I don't think that's what we want, and I don't think that's what we want for future generations here today. People have talked a lot about the political implications of this. Well, personally, I wish this had never happened, obviously, and I also wish, in terms of political things, it had never happened. I want to think this settlement will work. I want to think it will give this society the stability that it desperately needs. But at the end of the day, there's one simple way to deal with political implications, and that is to cooperate fully with the investigation of the Garda and the PSNI, to use whatever influence you have to make sure that anybody you have influence with does the same, and to be public and unambiguous in that, and not to undermine that investigation by trying to besmirch the memory of the victim of a murder. And you do that, there are no political implications. Nobody can make any political points out of it, and that would be the end of the story. Would be in a situation where we had an investigation into a brutal, tragic murder, the same as it was in any other country, where the police would be allowed to do their job and they could expect the support of the leaders of the country. I think, I mean, some of the people said that one of the mistakes that the killers made was doing this across the border, and I think that's right, and I've always thought that was right, because I think the guards are a lot more independent from political interference. And don't kid yourself, they're powerful people, and I'm not just talking about Sinn Féin, but there are powerful people who would love to sweep this whole thing under the carpet because it's very inconvenient with them. But very much for all the work you're all doing. Keep it up. This is always the hardest part, in a sense, because the media have had their sort of feeding frenzy, and the sort of people have met you, and all the political leaders have had their chance to meet you. This is the hard bit. Keep it going. Don't give up. And that's really
Just a further point on the councillor who spoke a few minutes ago. I left Sinn Féin a number of years ago and I met that man in this town many a time. We could stop and have a chat, could pass the time of the day, no problem. Never fell out. This evening as he walks up the steps and said hello, he couldn't answer me. So when that held his own stay, no, any kind of a rancour didn't arise with me. But Jerry made the important point there about there are people like this swept under the carpet. John O'Dowd's statement yesterday in Shaw made that clear. He actually said that it was a political issue from their perspective. But Stephen made it very clear when he was speaking that the family, and indeed the group and the neighbours, saw this as a murder by IRA members because of personal grievances. Nothing to do with politics. Nothing even to do with IRA as an IRA, but individuals using their positions and their capabilities and their access to other people's to get vengeance for some alleged slight. Basically, Paul Quinn wouldn't bow the knee. And poor Paul's dead. But Paul wouldn't bow the knee. He was that kind of a young man. And most young men are like that. And do we want our sons and our daughters to be bowing the knee? And to be bowing and scraping? Do we want the new, actually we're getting them. We're getting the new landlord society in Ireland. We're getting the new wealthy. We're getting the new domineering class under our own. They're not being sent over from Britain. We're rearing them ourselves. Poor old Conley. He said changing colours of letterboxes and changing colours of flags meant nothing, unless you change systems, root and branch. We're not changing them. Our own people are just taking over the same system and using it against our neighbours. And in this case, they use the system to murder the neighbour's child. Have we any more elected reps who wish to?
Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, you're all very welcome here tonight in the search for truth and justice. My name is Frank Feely. I'm an SDLP councillor for Newry, and I would like to condemn the brutal, savage and primitive murder of Paul Quinn. I have never heard of anybody since the tortures in Africa being put through such a death and being tortured for so long before he was murdered. It absolutely cries out to heaven for vengeance and for justice. And that's why I'm here tonight, to support the campaign for justice and for truth, and that those responsible will be brought to justice and sentenced and put in jail. I was amazed to hear the statement made by Conor Murphy and by Jerry Adams so quickly after the murder of Paul Quinn. He couldn't have did much research, because almost immediately the statement came out that there was no Republican involvement. And that's very strange indeed, because if you threw a stone across a fence in South Armagh, you were sure to hit a Republican or a Republican supporter. And the vote that Conor Murphy got in the past would show you that. But yet they were able to say categorically that there was no Republican involvement. But very few believed him. Not everybody believed him. And as you saw, all the other Republicans in elected members and others all announced and said the same thing. They followed the mantra, and none of them contradicted their leaders, because they're not allowed to think for themselves. But when in a very short time, there was other opinions being expressed very firmly. The first of them by the International Commission. That's the body set up by the Irish and British government. It has no interest in telling lies whatsoever. It's an international body. It's paid to do the job, and it only makes statements when something very serious occurs in the community. And in this case, within 1 week, they announced that there was indeed IRA or former IRA involvement in the murder of Paul Quinn. And that was certainly good enough for me and good enough for thousands of other people, because we knew that they were set up as part of the Good Friday Agreement and as part of the deal in the release of prisoners to monitor the events that would happen after the decommissioning of weapons by the IRA. And they're a very reputable body. That was followed very quickly by members of the PSNI, senior members, and In fact, senior members of the Garda said there was undoubtedly Republican involvement. But the weight of opinion for me came from the people of South Armagh. I attended a Cross McGlynn meeting and the Blaney meeting, and I was amazed at the number of young people, young men and women, who said categorically that there was Republican involvement in the murder of Paul Quinn. And indeed, the dogs in the street were saying it shortly after that because it was written on the walls. Now, that's not something I agree with, but because everybody is entitled to a fair trial. But nevertheless, you could not convince anybody in the Cross McGlynn area that there was Republicans were not involved. And that's the way it is. So I leave it to yourself to judge who is telling the truth. The weight of circumstantial evidence is undoubtedly against what Conor Murphy was saying. The second part of his statement said that young Paul was involved in criminal activities, and while Mr. Adams said he was a criminal. That was an incredible statement coming from Republicans, because in the past, when Republicans were called criminals, they created a storm in Northern Ireland, and they were so upset that they actually went on hunger strike to prove that they weren't. And excuse me. And they continued on. Their leader and visionary, Tobias Sands, died on hunger strike, and so did 9 others. And eventually, the British government gave way, and they were no longer regarded as criminals. People that are prepared to go to those lengths should not be calling other people, particularly people who live in South Armagh, as criminals. It was an incredible statement. And again, young people in the area proved that that was not the case. Certainly, young people, including Paul, were up to things that they shouldn't be. They were doing things that were wrong, as young people do, and they were also involved in smuggling. But if everybody that was involved in smuggling for the last 30 years in South Armagh are to be regarded as criminals, then there'd be a lot of his supporters gone. I mean, if that's the case, if he regards that everybody involved in smuggling were criminals. So I think that the enormity of the situation was seen by the Irish government, and I was glad to see that they were the first to withdraw those statements when their intelligence reports came back, and they categorically denied and stated that in no way did they regard Paul Quinn as a criminal or being involved in criminal activity. Now that's the taste of the country, the foreign minister and other ministers, but yet Republicans would not apologise, Conor Murphy would not apologise for what he said. So, you know, that's the way things rest at the moment, and they were given a further opportunity yesterday in Stormont to withdraw their remarks. Some speakers even stopped in the middle of what they were saying and said, right, I will now give you as long as you need to retract what you have said and to apologise to the Quinn family. And there followed 2 minutes of total silence. But nobody said a word. Republicans did not retract what they had said, did not apologise to the Quinn family. And this was, there were other speakers there, like Jerry McHugh, who was elected in a Republican Sinn Féin MLA and who left before Christmas because he wanted to do his own thinking and he couldn't go along with what he was being told to think. And he said that there was a definite campaign against Paul Quinn, and a definite campaign to see that justice would not be done. Again, I would like to congratulate our own MLA, Dominic Bradley, for bringing this motion and getting it on the paper in Stormont and having it passed by all members and all parties in Stormont except Sinn Féin. That was a remarkable achievement for Dominic Bradley, and his involvement also with the Dublin government led them to debate in the Dáil, and they also condemned the activities of the IRA, or former IRA members that were involved in
Maybe you can hurry up, please, Frank.
That brings me to justice, talk about justice. And when it comes to justice, you're talking about the kernel of the problem. Justice is the Achilles heel of Sinn Féin. And that's very, very obvious, that they cannot administer justice to their former comrades, and they refuse to do it. Hence, the statements of saying there's no Republican involvement and Paul is a criminal, etc., etc. And the classic case of that was a
Right, excuse me, Frank, if you don't mind, please, we need to move on.
I should be allowed to finish. I'm good enough to get up and talk, especially if I have something to say and it's different. And I think I am saying something that's different.
Hurry up, Frank.
I didn't say it was about Sinn Féin. I said it was about Sinn Féin. I have no interest in bringing down Stormont or anything else. I worked for 30 years with the SDLP to establish power sharing and an Irish dimension. But I want to see that justice is part of the new Stormont settlement. The classic case was the murder of Robert McCartney, when even though every Republican in the area knew who did it, and some of them even told his sisters, still they could not hand them over to the police. They just couldn't do it, and they wouldn't do it, and they haven't done it so far. And neither will they do it with Paul Quinn. And until such time as they realise that justice must be seen to be done, and until such time as they realise that justice must be impartial and must be seen to be impartial, then we'll have no real peace and no real justice coming from Stormont. Thank you very much.
Chairman, thank you. I'll be very brief. I'm conscious all that people are looking at. Chairman, my name is Gary Stokes. I'm a local councillor. I'd just like to take the opportunity, Chairman, to commend Paul's parents. I, for one, can't begin to imagine what they're going through and have been going through since November. I think they really are an example to us all. And I just
Thank you very much, Councillor. Now we're open to any members of the public who come on ahead. Yes, you can not like that one. And if you just identify yourself, simple as that, and we'll not be too hard on time. But
Chairperson and members of the Quinn Support Group, my name's Tom Moore, born and reared on the South Armagh end of Newry, now living on the South Down end of Newry, so I hope nobody will hold that against me. Can I say, Chairperson and members, I wasn't intending to speak here tonight. I was certainly intending to be here. But it was on my way to this meeting tonight that it suddenly dawned on me that 37 years ago, as a 25-year-old, so you now also know what age I am, but 37 years ago, just across the street from here in Water Street, I sat in a car with 3 other young men, one from Crossford Lane, one from Cullyhanna, and one from Newton Hamilton. And we were discussing what can we do to raise the people in South Armagh's interest in civil rights and what is happening throughout Northern Ireland in relation to civil rights. Because, and this is no reflection on anyone in South Armagh, but at that time there were individuals certainly involved and interested in what was happening, but collectively there wasn't any real interest. And we sat wondering what could we do to raise people's interest in civil rights. Sure, less than 6 months later, the situation changed utterly. A young South Armagh man was murdered by the British Army. Immediately after it, The then Stormont Minister, responsible for regional development amongst other things, went on record to say that the young man was a criminal. But the people of South Armagh knew this was a lie and that it was an attempt at a cover-up. They knew that Harry Thornton from Tullydallen was innocent, that he was on his way home from work in Belfast in a van that unfortunately backfired on his way past a British Army barracks. And the people of South Armagh queued up to join whatever organisation they thought would bring justice for the murder of Harry Thornton. I am delighted, Chair, to find and to know that the people of South Armagh are likewise seeking justice for the murder of Paul Quinn. And that tonight, I want to pledge my support to the group. And I would say that for the sake of all the young people of South Armagh, I trust that you will succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Just for any of the people from out of the country that doesn't know Tom, Tom's a lifelong Republican, a trade unionist, an activist on behalf of people's rights all his life, and obviously still the same. I'd forgotten about the incident of Harry Thornton and their bearing on this. It has a very, very great relevance to what we're doing. Next speaker, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll keep this as brief as possible. I'd just like to say, first of all, in relation to the comments made by Brendan Corn, there was a district policing board meeting here one night which was picketed at that door, which I came through to castigate the police. Him and his party were at that door and then came into the hall with a silent picket round, intimidated everybody in the hall, and on my way out I was referred to as a scab. And I told you, ma'am, that night, it's a good job you know the word scab because you couldn't spell wound. Ladies and gentlemen, Conor Murphy said he made criminality allegations on information available at the time. The inference from that statement was that he now had different information. The ideal chance to withdraw that remark was at Stormont, which he failed to do. Yet in today's Reporter, he slates the castigation of the IRA, and I quote, "without a shred of evidence." Where is his evidence against Paul Quinn, a man unable to defend himself? The IRA have not gone away. Why do they need Conor Murphy, a Democrat, sworn to law and order, to speak for a shadowy organisation? The Garda, the MIC, the police and 3 governments all say Paul Quinn is not guilty. That means that the PSNI are incompetent. That being the position, why is Conor Murphy and his party asking us to support the police force that he says is incompetent? If he supports law and order, why is he not giving the police the information that he has? As to the criminality of Paul Quinn, does he not trust the police? Is he asking us to support police that he does not support? As a total insult to the family of Paul Quinn, he left the chamber prior to the culmination of the meeting. Covered today in the press with a feeble excuse, was called on ministerial business. We believe that as much as we believe Paul Quinn was a criminal. After he left, why did the rest of the flock sit in silence? Had no one the courage to move from the party whip, stand up and be counted? Be a man and say, this is wrong. We all aspire to utopia. We will never achieve it. But we will achieve nothing while people are afraid to speak their minds. I said in Blaney, stand up and be counted. I now challenge those in Sinn Féin who know this is all wrong to turn on your masters. You were never meant by the Republican movement to be servants. That is what you have become. A child has been put in a dark hole. You, by your collusion, are in a darker place, and it's getting darker and more evil and more unjustifiable. Take your stand. Gerry Adams started this scurrilous character assassination and then fell silent. He passed the poison chalice to Conor Murphy and then took a vow of silence. The amount of people against this slaughter of Paul Quinn is overwhelming, but everybody is out of line except our Johnny, Sinn Féin. We will agree with everyone as long as they agree with us. I ask the audience to think. Shot at by shot and shell, bravely they rode and well, into the jaws of death rode the 600. I say, join the 600. Conor Murphy, you cast at those who broke windows and caused damage to what you said they may well be right, were innocent people. Will you now stand up and castigate those who wrecked property on the 24th of August 98, members of your party with a total clearance? In conclusion, when you left the storming chamber, someone said silence is deafening. I say you got into the kitchen, Conor, because it got hot, and it's going to get hotter.
Anyone else want to say a few words? More than welcome. We have a few minutes, not a lot of time left, but a few minutes if anybody has any points to want to raise. Just, I see Pat McNamee sitting down there. Pat and myself are two very bad boys according to one particular political party. Well-known members of that provisional movement, I don't use the word Republican, but the provisional movement, well-known members around Crossborough have actually said, admitted, we know we done it. But if that so-and-so McNamee and that so-and-so McAllister really shut up, it'll be forgot about in a few weeks. They are convinced that they'll never be got, and that if the Quinn support group and the Quinn family would be quiet, everything would be rosy in the garden. But the garden won't be rosy until these murderers are arrested and put away for a long time. How could the garden be rosy with people like that in the garden? How could... Our MP knows so much about these two feuding smuggling gangs. Suppose we would assume the four young fellas was one of these gangs. You know, a harmless kid of a gang, 4 20 and 21-year-olds. Suppose they're one of the feuding gangs. Conor must know who the other gang is. And I do believe that, as I think it was Gabe said, that if it was smuggling gangs were killing each other, I think the Yardley would have them probably in 2 or 3 days, certainly in a couple of weeks. Because feuding smuggling gangs wouldn't have the wherewithal or the knowledge to protect themselves. But you know, in all that will have to be done to go over a job like that, not be caught, not be saw, leave nothing behind. Anyone wants to do anything at all? Ask any questions? Davey, come on ahead.
Chairman, I just also like to congratulate the Paul Quinn support group for the sterling work that you have done in the last 4 months. It's very sad that you had to come into being in the first place. But since that time, since Paul's horrific murder, you have come together and you've put pressure where pressure has to be applied. And I want to congratulate you for doing that. What you've done, you've got the Taoiseach, you've got all the main parties in the south of Ireland, you've got the police forces in both parts of the country, you've got the IMC, as shown in Stormont yesterday, you have all of the major parties in the north supporting you. And that's great to have that support and to have the support of people here tonight. I'm surprised really, Brendan Curran came here tonight as a spokesperson for Sinn Féin. I've known Brendan for a long time. And Brendan says he knows nothing about Paul, and he knows nothing about his murder. I find that very, very strange because Brendan is chairman of the present police DPP. He's also chair of the Sinn Féin group in Newry and Mourne. And Paul was a constituent of Brendan Curran, because Brendan Curran is a councillor for the whole of Newry and Mourne. I'd also like to say that Conor Murphy's behaviour, and many people have spoken about it tonight, was simply unbelievable. His arrogance is unbelievable. He said that Paul Quinn was part of a fuel smuggling racket. When that was dropped, he says Paul Quinn was a criminal. When that dropped, he still refuses to deny it. He continues on saying that that was his assessment at the time, and he refuses to move on from it, despite everybody else saying different. Now, in the course of this century, we have stood up to fascists in Germany who tortured the Jews and the travelling community and other peoples. We've stood up against people like Allende in Chile, or Allende's supporters in Chile, who were also tortured by fascists. And by God, we're going to stand up to fascists today. We're not going to have these people destroy our lives and the lives of our children.
Jim, could I just put a suggestion that has nothing to do with the meeting? Just something that I'm running past. In a debating society situation, you have two lights on stage which give you a time and then you give a wrap-up time. As your meetings get bigger, you're going to have more difficulty allotting times. Would it be an idea to think along them lines?
I don't know many people here. This is a very, very big room. In fact, it's far away the biggest room we've been here. But it's a substantial audience here. If you're in a normal-sized hall, like Crossman or Blenny, you'd be overflowing again as you were in Crossman and Blenny. So I don't know the numbers. It's really a damn good turnout. We're far from home. We're very pleased with it. So unless somebody some specific point to make, we'll thank. No, Pat's going to say a word.
There will be young days.
Sabotage, no. Thanks, Jim, for the opportunity of saying a couple of words. I am a supporter of the Quinton Support Group, and I'm a member of the Quinton Support Group, although I'm not on the committee. I've tended to keep a low profile, although I think maybe I made a mistake, because there were people making accusations that Paul Quinn's death was being politicised by people who were opposed to a certain political party. And myself and Jim did discuss it and decided that we would not have former Sinn Féin members so prominent on the committee. But the fact of the matter is that Paul Quinn's murder, a brutal and savage murder, is a political issue. Every political party in the 6 counties represented in the Northern Ireland Assembly took part in the debate yesterday. And all of those parties either explicitly or indirectly acknowledged that his death is a political issue. And so I am as much entitled to speak about it as anybody else. I am a former member of Sinn Féin and a former elected representative. Don't hold that against me. Yeah. There are an awful lot of other people like me. But what we should remember is that this is not about Sinn Féin. And this is not an anti-Sinn Féin group or an anti-Sinn Féin campaign. And I'll prepare for the abuse, but I will say this, that there are a lot of decent people in Sinn Féin, and we shouldn't make the mistake of isolating ourselves from those people. Because I know for a fact, having spoken to people who are more recently ex-members of Sinn Féin, like Jerry McHugh from Fermanagh, South Tyrone, who had great difficulty with Sinn Féin's position and had to reach a certain point where they left Sinn Féin to go and to be independent in their political view. And we have to remember that. We shouldn't attack people simply because they're members of Sinn Féin. There are those in Sinn Féin who have forgotten what Sinn Féin is about. I don't know if you can spell the word republicanism, but if they had any basic knowledge of what the tenets of republicanism are about, it would amaze you that they are now sharing power in a 6-county British arrangement and fully endorsing all the institutions of that state. But that's aside, that's a political view, and everyone's entitled to a political view. But we shouldn't see the individual members of Sinn Féin as an enemy. The leadership of Sinn Féin have become intoxicated by power, or the semblance of power, and the administration of British rule and all the perks that go along with that. What we should be trying to do is to reach out to the decent people, to the decent Republicans, and South Armagh is a Republican area, and all the people in South Armagh and all the Republicans in South Armagh are not responsible for Paul Quinn's death. There are those people who are motivated by self-gain and power, and they need to be isolated, and they need to be brought to justice and made to pay the consequences for what they have done. Not alone have they murdered Paul Quinn and slandered his name, they have brought republicanism into disrepute. Shouldn't they?
Thank you, Pat. And thanks very much for turning out here tonight, folks. We know it still takes a bit of courage to come to these kind of meetings, in particular for some people living in certain places, that kind of thing. So fair play to you. And you know, to the media and to word of mouth, our next, where we're going next, what we're doing next. We take a few days to get our heads together and decide our next step. But we guarantee you we won't stop working until we get justice for Paul and for Paul's family. So fair play to you all for coming. The couple of boxes out the door. If you have a couple of bob spare on the way out, thanks very much. If you haven't, don't worry about it at all. Your presence was the main thing here, and your support. It means a lot to Stephen and the family, means a lot to the group, and I think it means a lot for a better future, not only for South Armagh and Newry, but for Ireland. This crime must be solved for the future of our people. Thank you very much.